evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Mythgard Academy. This is session number 24 on the Name of the Rose as we get towards the end of the 6th day, or is it the beginning of the 7th day, which I don't think starts until dawn. But anyway, as we are approaching here the beginning of the 7th day, we come to the final confrontation between Brother William and the murderer, which is, at least begins, really politely, if you don't count the poison. But before we get into the final showdown in the Finis Africae, just one important announcement tonight, and that is just to let folks know that the registration for Mythmoot for this year is finally open. We had a ton of problems getting everything set up on the business side with our dear venue for Mythmoot this year, but we got everything squared away now, and we are really excited to have everything up and running and ready to go and preparing for another wonderful Mythmoot as always. So I hope that many of you will be able to join us. I know I look forward to seeing many of you every single year, and also Arthur. Just kidding, Arthur. I look forward to seeing you every single year, and it'll be great to it'll be great to get together again. Mythmoot is such a fun culmination of the moot year. I spend the whole rest of the year traveling about, going to regional moots and getting to connect with small groups of people and stuff. And the one time every year when, so many people are able to gather together in one place, I think is always just so delightful. So, greatly looking forward to that. And as I say, it is now finally open for registration. So you can go to blackberry.signumuniversity.org and finally purchase your ticket for Mythmoot. Golly, I'm forgetting what number this is. What number is Mythmoot this year? Is it 13 this year? I'm 12. 12, yeah, okay, it's 12. Mythmoot 12 this year. Anyway, I hope that you'll be able to join us again this year, and I look forward to seeing you again. All right, let us return to the text. We are in the final we were just in the final conversation between William and the abbot. So we see William playing with words again in his conversation with the abbot. He mentions the Finis Africae to the abbot, and the abbot asks him a direct question with a certain amount of outrage. "This is impossible. How do you know about the Finis Africae? Have you violated my ban and entered the library?" William ought to have told the truth, but the abbot's rage would have known no bounds. Yet, obviously, my master did not want to lie. He chose to answer the question with another question. "Did your magnificence not say to me at our very first meeting that a man like me, who had described Brunellus so well without ever having seen him, would have no difficulty picturing places to which he did not have access?" Answering the question with a question is, of course, a very clever way to avoid telling a lie, right? To avoid saying an untruth. This particular sort of dodge is very traditional. It's interesting because, of course, again, one of the things that this touches on in our continued exploration of Umberto Eco's rolling out all possible combinations of how signs and words are used. There are ways in which you can avoid telling lies, which are varying degrees of directly untruthful. You can simply, you can say something which is purposefully misleading, right? Which is inviting a misinterpretation. You can do. Notice what William does here. He doesn't want to tell a lie, but he doesn't want to admit the truth and simply answer the question, yes, in fact, I have violated your ban and entered the library, right? So how does he avoid this? He does, one of the problems that William is facing here, like one of the things he's trying to work around, it's not simply about a matter of technicality. That is to say, yes. So Eric, you're pointing exactly to one of the most sort of famous, but rather unsatisfying ways of avoiding untruth, where you say something and then you mentally add a reservation or a qualification that you don't say out loud, right? So it's like the statement that you made in your heart is true, technically, and not a lie, but the words that you actually said were a lie, right? And that is a dodge which is rather a poor dodge, because, Jack, as you say, it's a lie still, right? And even beyond, like, even if you stretch the point to say, well, no, like the whole statement, including the part I didn't say actually out loud, was technically true, it is still a statement that you are making in order to, in fact, transmit an untruth. You are still pointing, again, thinking about signs and things, your words are still pointing in a fraudulent direction. Essentially, you are attempting to direct your listener away from what is the actual truth, right? These kinds of technicalities where you're like, well, it's okay because what I said was in some sense technically true, or but again, like if you're deliberately attempting to mislead, right? If you are, then it doesn't actually matter all that much, right? Like the fine point of the matter is that you have still told a lie, right? What William does here is a little bit different. He is avoiding answering the question, yes. But what he doesn't do is utter an untruth, or indeed even a misleading statement designed to be misinterpreted, or any of that sort of thing, right? His question, did your magnificence not say to me at our first meeting that a man like me, who had described Brunellus so well without ever having seen him, would have no difficulty picturing places to which he did not have access? And of course, there is also, what is he implying? By asking that question, he's implying that he is able to picture the inside of the library without having access to it. Like even when he's not going into it, which he did do, in fact, right? He also went into it, right? But of course, in particular, in referring to the Finis Africae, he has not had access to the Finis Africae because he still hasn't figured out how to get into it. Yeah, Gerald, I agree. What he's doing is distracting Abba with the question and changing the direction of the conversation. There is still an element of untruthfulness here, right? There is still an obvious element of avoidance, where he is avoiding untruth by basically refusing to answer the question. He's not given an answer to the, so he didn't give a misleading answer to the question. He simply didn't answer the question. But there is still that element of like, I'm inviting you to imagine an answer to your question, which is in fact not true. It is still a dodge. Yeah. But it's squirrely. Which of course, so remember in the Inquisition, right? exactly this kind of thing. This is exactly how these are the squirrel tricks that what's his name, the cellarer, Remigio, was in fact doing at the beginning of the trial in order to avoid lying to the Inquisitor, in order to avoid either giving a damning answer or remember that sort of dance, right, that Remigio and Bernard were doing during especially that early part of the Inquisition. This is kind of similar to that, right? We can see a similarity there. The way in which a cleverly turned answer, which does not commit him to any kind of a falsehood, and does not even strongly, again, it only kind of gently suggests an untrue answer, right, to the very direct question of the abbot. First Fish says it gives the abbot an escape too. Yeah, it does. It does. It also does a little bit more, I think, which is that it is a question which also, from the beginning, William has argued both to the abbot explicitly and behind the abbot's back that the abbot's prohibition is unreasonable, that his protectiveness of the library is at the very least excessive, right? And that William clearly felt that to be asked to investigate this while not being allowed to investigate the library at all was an unreasonable restriction. And so he is also kind of pointing to this a little bit here, kind of raising that issue indirectly. Yeah. Anyway, Adso says William ought to have told the truth, right? William ought to have confessed. But notice that Adso does immediately recognize the problem, right? The abbot's rage would have known no bounds. So he can see the very negative effects that William telling the truth would have in this moment. He has a certain amount of sympathy for William's situation, that William is caught in a difficult situation where to tell the truth is going to create a significant problem, but to lie simply is wrong. Yeah. It's interesting. Jackie says it reminds her of Éomer's discussion of falsehoods. Yes, of truth-telling. And then also Faramir's discussion about, snaring orcs with a falsehood, right? As well. Yeah. It's a complicated moment. But again, it brings our attention to the interaction between not just words and what the words are pointing to, but how the intention of the speaker is manifested in words. And this kind of really complicated communication situation, right? How can William manage this? He can't say nothing. It's going to create problems if he confesses the truth. How does he communicate? How does he respond without communicating, or without either communicating an untruth or refusing to communicate at all? Now, after this, we get this fascinating moment where the book that we're reading is almost prevented. Still with the abbot. He held out the ring for me to kiss, and I knelt. He stroked my head. And so, boy, you must forget the things, no doubt erroneous, that you have heard these days. You have entered the noblest, the greatest order of all. Of this order I am an abbot, and you are under my jurisdiction. Hear my command. Forget, and may your lips be sealed forever. Swear. Moved, subjugated, I would certainly have sworn. And you, my good reader, would not be able now to read this faithful chronicle of mine. But at this point William intervened, not perhaps to prevent me from swearing, but in an instinctive reaction out of irritation to break the spell, to break that spell the abbot had surely cast. What does the boy have to do with it? I asked you a question. I warned you of a danger. I asked you to tell me a name. Do you now wish me too to kiss the ring and swear to forget what I have learned or what I suspect? So, the abbot's command, and not just his command, this idea of the spell that the abbot has cast here. The abbot invokes and enacts ritual with his ring and his proclamations. The beginning of the quotation is, of course, not the total beginning of this interaction. He's already, he's going through these ritual motions. He is invoking his authority and sort of bringing the whole system in which Adzo wants to believe and of which he wants to be a part. Bringing all of that to bear on Adzo, and this is characterized as a spell. Adzo describes himself as moved, subjugated. I would certainly have sworn. And now, no, I see. One of you was saying before, yeah, Gerald was asking, does writing count as keeping your lips sealed? Notice Adzo is not thinking that way, right? He's not looking to get off on a technicality. He immediately admits that had he sworn, he would not have written this book. He is only able to write this book. You would not be able now to read this faithful chronicle of mine if he had sworn. He's not looking to get off on some kind of technicality. He knows the abbot was commanding him to swear that he never tell anybody what he saw or learned during this week. And he says that he would have held to that. Right? And yes, Fencing Frog, as you say, the command is to forget. Forget, and may your lips be sealed forever. Now, forgetting, that is it's a lot to ask, right? It's a remarkable command. To command him not to speak of it, that seems, if not necessarily admirable, not entirely unreasonable command, or at least not an atypical kind of command, whatever we might think of it. Forget seems a little bit more ambitious, right? That is, yeah. And I agree, Eric. It's, I don't think that, on the one hand, I don't think that Abbo here, the abbot, actually believes that he has the power to, expunge this from the memory of Adso, or believes that Adso has the ability to expunge it from his own memory. I agree with you that he means Adso to act like he's forgotten it. It's the effects that he's looking for. Agreed. As he points to by saying, "May your lips be sealed forever." And yet, the spell, right? The reference to it as a spell gives it the air of something, a more profound kind of effect, like that, like the power to actually make him forget, or to swear to forget, to really expunge it from his mind. To break that spell that the abbot had surely cast. But here's the thing. This is Adso saying this to us. That's old Adso's characterization of this. William doesn't use that word, spell, right? All of that, to break that spell the abbot had surely cast, moved, subjugated, all that is Adso's own language describing this, characterizing his own state, characterizing what the abbot was doing to him, and characterizing William's desire to break the spell. Like, and that's all Adso's language. William's own words don't point to that at all. What does the boy have to do with it? I asked you a question, right? The effect of William's words here are to break the spell and to prevent, like, they distract Abbo from the oath that he had just asked Adso to take, such that Adso never did in fact swear, and never is brought, in fact, to actually swear that thing. Yeah, Maureen, it does tell us that Adso felt it was like a spell. And, of course, one of the things that this does is draw our attention to yet another kind of speech act. In a sense, this is sort of like, remember when we were talking about the relics, which are things, but the things which point to something else? There are things which are more than the things that they are, right? What is this? What is happening here? What is a spell? A spell is words. But they're words that have power, that don't just point to things, but can make a thing happen. And what was his command? What was his spell? His spell was to have Adso, to compel Adso to swear. And what is an oath? Also, words which don't just point to a thing, but make a thing happening. Yes, like a blessing or a curse. Yes. Yes, a formula of power over living men, Jackie. Yeah, it's one way of putting it, what a spell is. Yes, but again, it's not just the spell. At the same time we have spell, we have oath here. And an oath is words, right? But the utterance of the words of an oath is itself a thing, is itself an action that has meaning, even in a sense apart from the words uttered in the oath. The words uttered in the oath are very important, right? I'm not trying to say they're not, but you see what I mean by saying it's not merely a speech act, it's an act as well. It is a thing, as well as being signs pointing to a thing. So both things, both the oath and a spell, have that kind of similarity, right? Both a spell and an oath are words that create something, that make a thing to be that wasn't before, through the utterance of words. And words have power. Words, when uttered under ritual circumstances like this, an abbot speaking to a novice, compelling him to swear, he claims the authority to bring Adso to make this oath. And you could argue that he doesn't have it, but he's invoking it, right? And Adso saying, if he had, in fact, uttered that oath, he'd have kept it, and we wouldn't know about this. But at the same time now, as in his later aged state looking back on this, he sees the spell-like nature of this, right? He seems to see the kind of mirroring of oath and spell there, and knows that a thing almost happened there. And I agree, Fencing Frog. This wouldn't be an oath made under duress. Adso would have made this oath in response to the invocation of authority by the abbot. But the authority that he invokes is legitimate authority. Adso has entered his order. Of this order, I am an abbot, and you are under my jurisdiction, he says. And that's true. He is in the order, and he is in this abbey. He's there, right? And the abbot has authority over members of his order in his abbey. Yeah. Jocelyn is asking, does it feel like an attempt to pull rank on William, to compel his novice, right? His assistant, right? Away right in front of his face. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And that, I think, is the irritation that William perceives. Not just that he's trying to, inconvenience William in some way, or he does have rank on William, so he doesn't even, in a sense, he doesn't need to do this in order to pull his rank. He is pulling his rank. He is asserting his authority as abbot here. But notice how William takes it, right? Do you now wish me too to kiss the ring and swear to forget what I have learned or what I suspect? William seems to believe that this whole performance with Adso is just an indirect message to him, right? And he calls it, right? He calls the abbot on it. Is this what you're trying to tell me here, right? Is this the message that you're sort of theatrically sending here? Jocelyn, Abbo, that is he bullying? It's hard. He is asserting authority, but it's an authority that he has. Is he trying to bully William? Yes, but he has some justification there. Williams doesn't belong. He's a guest. He doesn't belong here. He's not in his order even, right? He is a visiting guest to the monastery from a different order entirely, who does not have the right to mess about here, right? The abbot, gave him the authority, which he has now rescinded, right? Gave him the authority to investigate. And he, the abbot of this abbey, has now rescinded that authority. All of those things are perfectly legitimate, right? And so does the abbot have the right to tell William to go take a hike? Yeah, he does. I mean, I think he clearly has that authority. But Jackie, I agree that this sort of casting of the spell on Edzo is a strange sort of proxy moment, right? A strange way for the abbot to assert his authority, a strangely indirect way. And I think that's why William seems to call him on it. Like, speak to me directly. If this is what you're trying to say, then say it, which is a little ironic given William's own indirection and refusal to say the exact and clear truth himself just recently. Both of them are kind of dancing about each other in some different ways. But I like to think about old Edzo and the way in which he himself is reflecting back on this moment. William in the moment seems to be focused, naturally, on his own confrontation with the abbot, right? The characterization by old Edzo of the abbot's words as a spell being cast on his younger self, and William's desire to break that spell, I find interesting because he is now seeing kind of more to it. This is not just a sort of a game or gesture on the part of the abbot, as he again in that sort of like message that he's sending William. Again, it is that, but old Edzo looking back on it, sees it as something more than that. Something almost happened here. A spell was being cast on him, and he would have taken an oath. And had he taken the oath, had the spell taken its effect, and had he taken the oath, he'd have kept it. And yet, the spell is broken, the oath is prevented. That thing, that change, it never happened. It didn't occur. And what William is saying out of irritation, calling the abbot for his indirect message and calling out his indirect message, has this effect which William himself seems not fully to understand, but which Edzo later feels that he understands differently. Jackie's asking, is he trying to connect his position with some sort of mystical power? Is the abbot doing so? Sort of. The boundaries are hard. We've talked about this before. Like where the word hocus pocus, the phrase hocus pocus comes from, right? Fencing frog, that's exactly it. Don't priests by definition have spiritual power? Yes. And by the with their words they enact a spell which has actual spiritual efficacy every time they say mass, right? Yes. Hoc est enim corpus meum. Eric, all of the sacraments. And of course, sacrament is another thing that's in that similar category to relics, which are things, but also more than just the things that they are. and oaths, which are words that point to things, but they also are things they're more things than any word. I mean, all words are things, like they exist, so they're things. The category of things is the big category, right? Of which signs and words are subsets, according to St. Augustine. But oaths are a special thing, and a spell is a special. The casting of a spell is not just the uttering of a word, but the performance of an action, right? A sacrament, similarly, is a thing. It's an action. The eating of a piece of bread, the drinking of wine, the pouring of water over someone's head, or the dunking of somebody into water. All of those things, the absolution of someone for sins they have confessed, and you proclaim them free. You proclaim them absolved. And when you do, when you say those words, something has happened. That person is different now. It has a spiritual power. Just as when in the Catholic Mass, they hold up the wafer and say, hoc est corpus, this is my body. It's a spell, or it's like a spell, in the sense that it is words, and when those words are uttered, something has happened. The bread is not just bread anymore. It has been changed into the body of Christ. So yeah, I mean, that's those things are part of the reality of this world that they're living in. Yeah, it's transubstantiation that I'm referring to. And yes, Calvin, by the power vested in me, absolutely. The marriage, when the priest declares a couple married, that's a sacrament too. And so, yes, like something has happened, something has changed. Those two people are different now than they were before. They were two, but now they are one. And yes, Eric, I agree. It's sort of further down the spectrum, but it's on the same spectrum as God saying, "Let there be light," and there was. The efficacy of the words of God. Yes. And the efficacy of the words of the priests are similar, and the efficacy of an oath to bind, right? And the efficacy of a spell to bind. All of those things, there's a relation among all of those things. All of those things are not the same, right? But they all have one thing in common, which is that they are all speech acts, which are more than just words. They're more than merely signs that point to a thing. So yeah, these are the things that are kind of evoked here. And now I agree that Jackie, I agree that this is different. This is not a sacrament that's happening here, right? It's not the same category of things. Well, no, it is the same category. It's not the same thing, but it's in the same category of things. Spells and oaths are both in that same kind of words as those speech acts, which are not just speech acts. And I think it's important that Adso is thinking in these terms later on, is seeing so much more at stake here. Feeling the weight of this moment. William is just debating with the abbot, right? William is sparring here verbally. The words, he's in that political mode that we've seen before, where you don't like just pay attention to what people say. You look at what they're trying, how they're trying to turn things, how they're trying to position things, what they're actually attempting to do. That kind of interpretation, remember, that we've been seeing young Adso getting better and better at, right? But yeah. That's the mode that William is in. Adso feels that something more is at stake here. Yeah. Okay. Then we get William's final moment of epiphany. The horse number 3 in the stable, they're going down to the stables to keep watch because William has no idea what to do next. And his only lead is the whole apocalypse thing. And horses are mentioned in connection with the next trumpet. So he's like, the stables, I guess, is the only lead we have. And Adso makes that random comment. The third horse in the line, lifts up his head and whinnies. And Adso is like, oh, look, it's the Tertius Equi. The third horse. What? William asked. Nothing. I was remembering poor Salvatore. He wanted to perform God knows what magic with that horse, and with his Latin he called him Tertius Equi, which would be the U. The U? Asked William, who had heard my prattle without paying much attention to it. Yes, because in good Latin, Tertius Equi doesn't mean the third horse, but the third of the horse, or the third letter of the word equus, which is therefore the U. But this is all nonsense. William looked at me, and in the darkness I seemed to see his face transformed. God bless you, Adso, he said to me. Why, of course, suppositio materialis. The discourse is presumed de dicto and not de re. What a fool I am. He gave himself such a great blow on the forehead that I heard a clap, and I believe he hurt himself. My boy, this is the second time today that wisdom has spoken through your mouth, first in dream and now waking. Run to your cell and fetch the lamp, or rather both lamps we hid. Let no one see you, and join me in the church at once. Ask no questions. Go. Do you see what William realizes? And I love the terms that he uses here. He makes it so clear. Suppositio materialis. The discourse is presumed de dicto and not de re. These are all terms that you're going to be familiar with. The discourse is presumed de dicto. The discourse is presumed to be... So what is de dicto? And what is de re? Yes, about the words, the speaking, and not about the thing. William has been thrown off by misdirection in Venantius's cipher, the first and seventh of the fourth. Remember, that's the key thing. The first and seventh of the fourth. And he had no idea what that meant. The fourth what? Exactly, Fanaro. It's about the sign, not about what the sign is pointing to. it's not the fourth meaning pointing to some fourth thing in some category, of which you're supposed to look for the first and seventh of the things in that category or whatever. Like, that's what he was assuming, but they had no clue what the fourth was. The fourth what? Because they were thinking of what the words were pointing to as signs, right? He was assuming that it was pointing to some fourth thing. But what it was talking about was the word not as a sign, but as a thing itself. The first and seventh letter of the word fourth. And that's, of course, what Adso and indirectly Salvatore lead him to remember. Now, careful readers of this book, not to mention savvy people, at least with retentive memories of our discussions of New Testament references in this book discussion so far, will see the clever relevance that this has, which I'm trying to point to, perhaps less cleverly, in my subtitle here. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse. That, of course, is a quotation from the book of Revelation, just like most quotations in this book have been quotations from the book of Revelation, specifically pointing to the third horse that is revealed when the third seal is opened. Because we always quote Revelation. Now, people who know the book of Revelation very well will remember that the rider on the back of the black horse, which is the third horse, which comes forth at the breaking of the third seal of the book, is holding in his hand a scale, a balance, right? And the balancing scale is for justice, which is about to happen. It all works together. Alenardo knew everything. Well, we'll get back to that in a little bit. William's realization, and Jackie, I really like him, Adso's concern that he, and I believe he hurt himself, right? Oh dear. I can often get a nice clap with my hand on my forehead. It's one of the advantages of going bald. This is exactly. yes. Excellent usage of the face palm image emoji here in Discord. Absolutely. The irony here is that this is the moment when William realizes that the book of Revelation really has nothing to do with the murders. Unless, of course, it does, right? As we will go on to see. But again, it's all about, his confusion was all about the fact that he was thinking about the word as a sign instead of the word as a thing, right? He wasn't thinking about the materialis, about the material thing. He was thinking about what other thing it pointed to. And there's some irony here, as focusing downward on the material things is William's whole method, right? Whereas thinking about the signs is the other method that everybody else uses. Exactly, Jackie. He was acting like everyone else in this book, and in the end realized that he had been sucked into exactly that mistake. I love the description of the Finis Africae when they finally enter it. We found ourselves on the threshold of a room similar in shape to the other 3 heptagonal blind rooms, dominated by a strong musty odor, as of mildewed books. The blind rooms are, of course, heptagonal. They have 7 sides. 7 sides to match the 7 seals in the book, and the 7 trumps of the archangel, and the 7 bowls of wrath as well. It's all in Revelation. The lamp, which I held up high, first illuminated the vault. Then, as I moved my arm downward, to right and left, the flame cast a vague light on the distant shelves along the walls. Finally, in the center, we saw a table covered with papers, and behind the table a seated figure who seemed to be waiting for us in the darkness, immobile, if he was still alive. Even before the light revealed his face, William spoke. "Happy night, Venerable Jorge," he said. "Were you waiting for us?" The lamp now illuminated the face of the old man, looking at us as if he could see. "Is that you, William of Baskerville?" he asked. "I have been waiting for you since this afternoon before Vespers, when I came and closed myself in here. I knew you would arrive." Fanaro, I did skip over the bit where someone was sealed behind the wall on their way to the library. I did. It's, of course, the abbot, right? The abbot is currently suffocating in the wall. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I skipped over the bit where they're hearing him thrashing around inside the wall. Yeah. There is something... Yeah, this is awful in more than one sense, Jackie. It's awful, of course, to think about poor Abbo, who is not the nicest fellow, but maybe deserves better than suffocating inside the wall. And also, by the way, being the first person that Jorge's actually killed, right? Jorge is now, very recently, a murderer, right? So the irony is that William only figures out who the murderer is at right about the same time when the murderer commits his first murder, in fact, right? Which is interesting. I know he was responsible for the deaths of many others, and William doesn't let him off on that. Anyway, but you see what I mean. Anyhow, what I love about this tableau is the idea they open this hidden vault dominated by a strong musty odor as of mildewed books. It's the most secret place. This is the holy of holies of this very secret library. And when they finally discover it and how to enter it and come in to find the heart of all of the mysteries into this dark, dusty, musty room, there's someone just sitting there in it, in the dark, waiting for them, right? There is something, I find something awful in the more literal sense, Jackie, I think, about that. The way in which Jorge is himself like the this secret figure, what it makes me think of more than anything else, is the way is shut dude, right, that Baldur meets in the Paths of the Dead, right? That's who it most reminds me of here. Of course, we know he's only been in here for a few hours. Like we just last time were talking about the sermon that he was just recently preaching. So it's not like he's actually been in here for decades or something like that. And yet it feels like that. He's a part of this room. The discovery of, like, the opening of the Finis Africae and the revelation of the deepest, darkest, literally deepest and literally darkest secrets of the library, and the revelation of Jorge as the murderer, Jorge as the central figure who has been coordinating all of this whole thing. Those two things are not, they don't just coincide, right? They don't just happen at the same time. They are very much of a piece. This is Jorge's place. This is Jorge's inner sanctum. I don't know whether he's an extension of it or it's an extension of him, right? Yes, Fëanor, that's a really good way of putting it. It's creepy that the library has always seemed like a cold, lifeless labyrinth, but the innermost chamber has a living person just waiting there. Yeah, exactly. That's really, really creepy. It is like First Fish, like a spider at the center of the web, right? Yeah, exactly. It has that sort of experience. And his greeting, what he says, right, is, I've been sitting here waiting for you for hours, right? His first words are essentially, you're late, right? Yes, Maureen, it is interesting that Adso is now more afraid of living than dead monks. Had he heard Adso remembers back to how terrified he would have been had he been hearing that thumping in the walls, several days before. He would have been convinced that he was hearing the unquiet spirits of dead monks. Now he believes it to be a living monk, and he's afraid of the other living monks lurking around waiting to kill him, right? But I agree. Yes, I do think it's important. The mildewed books, that's not just a throwaway line, right? Gerald, as you're pointing out, the books are not well kept. They're in the process of disintegration. Even the books are dying, as Eric says. Yes. This is the heart of the library in more than one sense, right? This is where the books are kept that are put here to die. Jorge won't just destroy them. But this is the vault to which no one is allowed to come, where knowledge is meant to be hidden away, in order to prevent it ever being revealed. Yes, Calvin, I agree that the word finis had already begun to feel ominous, and now it seems much more ominous, or more broadly ominous, right? Again, it's like this musty room where books themselves come to die, and which has been at the epicenter of all of this death and suffering in the Abbey, it is the end, right? Oh wait, are we talking about Revelation again? Yeah, it's the end. Let's keep going. I want, William said, Jorge has asked him what he wants. I want to see the last manuscript of the bound volume that contains an Arabic text, a Syriac one, and an interpretation or a transcription of the Koine Cypriani. I want to, that is, remember the comical burlesque of scripture that, travesty, technically, of scripture, that Adso was dreaming about, or which shaped subconsciously, Adzo's dream or vision, whatever it was. I want to see that copy in Greek, made perhaps by an Arab or by a Spaniard, that you found when, as assistant to Paul of Rimini, you arranged to be sent back to your country to collect the finest manuscripts of the Apocalypse in Leon and Castile, a booty that made you famous and respected here in the Abbey, and caused you to win the post of librarian, which rightfully belonged to Alenardo, 10 years your senior. I want to see that Greek copy written on linen paper, which was then very rare and was manufactured in Silos, near Burgos, your home. I want to see the book you stole there after reading it, to keep others from reading it, and you hid it here, protecting it cleverly, and you did not destroy it, because a man like you does not destroy a book, but simply guards it and makes sure no one touches it. I want to see the second book of the Poetics of Aristotle, the book everyone has believed lost or never written, and of which you hold perhaps the only copy. And this is finally the mystery. This is the answer to all of the mysteries. So, for those of you who don't know, this is a legitimate thing. Aristotle's Poetics, of course, very famous book. What we have of Aristotle's Poetics is Volume 1, which is about tragedy. And, of course, Aristotle's Poetics on tragedy has been massively influential in many ways ever since its rediscovery by in the West. It is, Aristotle says that there's a second volume, which is about comedy. So there's tragedy and comedy. He wrote that we have the tragedy one. The comedy one was lost. Some speculated that he never actually wrote it, that he just planned to write it and then never actually did. It's one of those books that is sort of speculated that the last copies were burned in the Great Library of Alexandria, and that's why we don't have the second volume of Aristotle's, the second book of Aristotle's Poetics. But this is a famous textual mystery. Yeah, maybe he didn't write it as a joke. There are some who have theorized that. Fencing Frog. That would be even funnier, wouldn't it? Yeah, but anyway, the answer to the riddle, the forbidden book that has been the cause of all of the trauma, is Aristotle's Comedics. The book everyone had thought was lost. And William says, I want to see that manuscript. I want to see Aristotle's. Please hand over Aristotle's Comedics. Notice, by the way, all of the, as he lays out all of the clues that he has put together of who the missing librarian was, who was responsible for bringing in all the manuscripts and where they came from. And yes, Fencing Frog, the book about comedy has caused tragedy. The irony of that, I think, is an important element of this. And Jackie, yes, this is the fulfillment of all of those references. This is the payoff of all of those references to laughter. And Jorge's stern opposition to laughter and to comedy, right? Yes. And here it is, the beginning of Aristotle's Comedics that William sight translates from the Greek. In the first book, we dealt with tragedy and saw how, by arousing pity and fear, it produces catharsis, the purification of those feelings. As we promised, we will now deal with comedy, as well as with satire and mime, and see how, in inspiring the pleasure of the ridiculous, it arrives at the purification of that passion. That such passion is the most worthy of consideration we have already said in the book on the soul, inasmuch as, alone among the animals, man is capable of laughter. We will then define the type of actions of which comedy is the mimesis. Then we will examine the means by which comedy excites laughter. And these means are actions and speech. We will show how the ridiculousness of actions is born from the likening of the best to the worst, and vice versa, from arousing surprise through deceit, from the impossible, from the violation of the laws of nature, from the irreverent and the inconsequent, from the debasing of the characters, from the use of comical and vulgar pantomime, from disharmony, from the choice of the least worthy things. We will then show how the ridiculousness of speech is born from the misunderstandings of similar words for different things, and different words for similar things. Boy, Arthur, how did we suddenly start talking about you? Anyway, sorry. Misunderstandings of similar words for different things and different words for similar things, from garrulity and repetition, from play on words, from diminutives, from errors of pronunciation, and from barbarisms. This is essentially Aristotle's table of contents, right? He's going to march through, of course, this is obviously speculation. The Comedics has never been found, in fact. So this is still an unsolved mystery. But this is the way that Aristotle works, right? He's laying out the plan for the book. That's what we're getting here. We will deal with comedy and see how, in inspiring the pleasure of the ridiculous, it arrives at the purification of that passion. So that's the first, like chapter 1, that's what he's going to show. Chapter 2, we will then define the type of actions of which comedy is the mimesis. Then we will examine the means by which comedy excites laughter. And these means are actions and speech. There'll be a chapter on actions, and then there'll be a chapter on speech as the means by which comedy excites laughter. How laughter is excited, first by actions, then by speech. We will show how the ridiculousness of actions is born from, he's doing the subsets, like the subsections of the action part, right? The actions chapter. The likening from the best to the worst and vice versa, from arousing surprise through deceit, all that stuff. Follies and nonsense, whims and inconsistencies. Do those divert you, Jocelyn? Slipping in a Pride and Prejudice quotation. But yes. I think that one does get the impression, right, that Jane Austen would have enjoyed this too. Yeah, all of this stuff is about signs, isn't it? And think about Jorge here. Right? Think about how all of this stuff works. Good. Bricktails is thinking back to the play on words about the hunting for truffles versus hunting for the devil. Yes. Exactly. That's excited laughter. Right? Misunderstandings of similar words for different things. Yeah. And how is it that speech causes laughter? That speech excites laughter? That's one example. The misunderstanding of similar words and different words for similar things. Garrulity and repetition. Play on words. Diminutives. Errors of pronunciation. And barbarisms. The juxtaposing of best and worst, Eric, this is a problem. Think about the ways in which this kind of thing has come up throughout this book. From Jorge's indignation about Adelmo's illustrations. Well, think about the illustrations themselves, right? You've got the Holy Scripture, the text in the middle, and then juxtaposed with it, the comical and ridiculous illustrations of Adelmo around the edges. You've got Jorge's objections thereunto, right? Jorge talking about how wildly inappropriate it is to excite laughter in conjunction with the Holy Scripture. He does, as you say, Eric, hate the idea of something high admixed with something low. It's funny, and laughter is natural to man, Eric. Yes, because so is sin, right? Jorge objects to that very strongly. Yes. But there have been other times when we have seen these kinds of patterns, right? The mixture of the high and the low. There was another example that I was just going to talk about, and I've totally forgotten about it. Oh yeah, of course. Think about how this also maps onto the very serious theological or doctrinal deliberations of Adso throughout this book. How can you tell heresy from truth? What's the difference if when you bring together, with Ubertino, right? I mean, like Ubertino's love and the love of the heretics, and it sounds exactly the same. Remember the whole sex, death, and religious experience, uncomfortable tripod, and all of those things. Like, Adso was trying to understand, like, where are the boundaries between these different extremes? The boundaries between the best and the worst. And here's Aristotle talking about ridiculousness of actions is born from the likening of the best to the worst, and vice versa. Well, it's exactly the likening, the likeness, right, between truth and heresy that was bothering Adso in the first place, right? Yeah. Yes. So this has been an issue all the way through. Think about, for instance, the discovery of Venantius's corpse in the vat of blood. That wasn't funny. That was tragic. And yet, disharmony, the likening of the best to the worst, there's elements here, right? Misunderstandings, reversals. Yeah. Diminutives. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Adso again. I'm thinking about Abo and Adso. I'm thinking about Ubertino and Anso. Yeah, the boy, Jackie, exactly. Brother William, the ex-inquisitor, and his novice sidekick Anso are also kind of like the sort of contrast that Aristotle is talking about here. And thus we have an explanation for all the corpses. What a fool. I think maybe I want to wait to talk about this, because there's going to be a couple slides where I want to talk about this. We will return to Aristotle's Comedics and William's reasoning about it, and Jorge and William's mutual admiration conversation, which Adso, I love the moment where Adso's like, get a room, you two. Right. But anyway, we will get there. For next time, certainly read through the end of the book. I don't know if we'll get all the way to the end next time, but we may get close to the end next time. I'm hopeful. So yeah, like the actual end. Then I reckon we should probably talk about the movie, because the movie's fun. Yeah. And we should also talk at least a little bit about the prologue as well. Anyway, we could watch the movie at Mythmoot. But anyway, yeah, we'll definitely talk about the movie. We'll do a session on the movie. So we got a couple sessions left, but we'll see how far we get towards the end of the book. We may have 2 sessions left before we get to the end of the narrative, and then we'll do some of the extra stuff, including the movie, after that. All right, yeah, and then back to the frame, the movie and the frame. I think I want to end with the frame, actually. All right, very good. Well, thanks everybody. I should be back next week. We will have some. I am pretty sure we're going to have the book finished before we get to Mythmoot. That's my goal. And then after Mythmoot, we can start our next book together, which will be The Peoples of Middle-earth, as we finally complete the History of Middle-earth series. So anyway, that's the road ahead. But read through the end of the narrative, and we will talk about that next time. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye now.